So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Jain. I'm your host today, and I represent an organization called Enabling World. So first of all, very warm welcome to all the participants. People are still joining in, but to our experts, special welcome to our experts today who have taken time from their busy schedule to join us on this interesting subject to share their insights, which is on gender neutrality at the workplace particularly. So first, let me welcome Pallavi. Pallavi is, as you can see, hi Pallavi, thanks for joining me. She's joining us from Singapore. So she's Senior Director, APAC for Johnson Controls Limited. And I had the, I must say, fortune of working briefly with her, in IBM when she also spent some good amount of time there. I was also there. So Pallavi, thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
And she has a special interest in multiple topics in HR, I know, and she's a very active speaker on the various forums. So in HR technology or diversity, on talent management. So she has huge global experience that we would benefit from. Thank you, Pallavi. All right. So next is Anandita. Anandita, hi. Thanks for joining in. Anandita is a very senior HR leader in HCL Technologies, and she leads the talent, the learning function, and the DI initiatives for HCL Technologies. And we would benefit a lot from her experience and her practices, her experiences on this topic. So thank you very much, Anandita, for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Perfect. And she works out of Noida. Today she's at Dehradun, but she works out of Noida office. Thank you very much. And let me also introduce Mr. JP Singh. Mr. JP Singh represents JSW, and he's Vice President HR there. And he's a very veteran in HR field and huge experience in manufacturing and variety of industries. And he also has been, was awarded most influential HR leader by World HR Congress. So he's a very eminent HR leader that we have with us on this topic. So thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining. Where are you joining from today? You're on mute.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjeev. I'm joining from Sambalpur, Odisha.
Sambalpur, Odisha. All right. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure we'll get very different perspective from you. And that's the advantage. We carefully invited people from different geographies, from different industries, so that we can different ideas. Let me also introduce Sushil here. Sushil is my partner, and he's joining from Bangalore. So he's also a very senior HR leader, has worked with Standard Chartered Bank, CGI, and a lot of other companies, and running this consulting for the last 10 years. So I'm Sanjeev Jain. I'm director, co-founder with Enabling World. I'm joining today from Delhi, and I'll be the host today. All right. So with that quick introduction, I think let me introduce Enabling World in less than a minute. So Enabling World who is the host for this session today, is a boutique HR consulting firm. We have interest in HR consulting advisory, into diversity and inclusion quite a bit, employee well-being, leadership development, and a little bit on outsourcing services, right? So these are some of the areas that we work in as a brief introduction, and we are celebrating 11th year of our existence. So thanks to all the colleagues, professionals, clients, partners who have helped us, sustain this journey. So, all right. So with that, so let's get into the session straight away. And my one suggestion to all the participants will be, keep your system on mute. If you want, keep your videos on. If you want, absolutely free. The only thing, leverage chat. I'm sure most of you must be familiar with Zoom, right? Who isn't, right? And then you can use chat for posting any questions. We have got some questions. This is to experts while people were registering. So I got a lot of questions from the participants. So it looks like the participants are very curious to know about this subject. So I will use some of those questions. Some I've written myself to drive home some learning on this topic, right? And feel free to add on. It's not a very scripted session. It'll be free flowing, but we'll stay focused on this topic of gender neutrality. My suggestion to all the participants would be, keep it interactive. Use chat to put your remarks, questions, and We will try to take as much as possible. We'll also maybe invite some of you, to unmute yourself, come on camera and have a dialogue, right? So we'll invite some of you, depending on the time that we have. And my request to all the experts will be, while you're not talking, if you see a comment, feel free to jump in and, put a comment in the chat itself. And from my past experience, I can tell you, we at times have parallel session running, right? One session here and another one on the chat. And that also generates a lot of good knowledge and remarks, right? So let's use all possible ways that we have. And for my friends and colleagues who are joining on the YouTube Live or LinkedIn, my team will be there to capture. If there is any comment or a question at those channels, we'll bring up here to the experts so that we don't miss on those, right? So with that little background, so let's begin straightway into the session. So I think as a brief context, we all, most of us are from HR field or in the business, and diversity has been the forefront of a lot of talent initiative in multiple organizations, progressive organizations, we all know, right? And I think for many of us, gender diversity is the main thing that, we spend most of our time on gender diversity. That's a very big issue, easy to recognize, and that's where our efforts have gone. Last many years, we have, started talking about LGBTQAI diversity, neurodiversity, disability, all kind of diversity, generational diversity, right? We have started talking about it, and for good, right? And I think I also keep hearing from a lot of people, oh, we have a gender neutral policy, right? People have started questioning, what about me, right? I mean, there are a lot of comments I hear, oh, we are talking about women, leadership in women in technology. What about us, right? And we do celebrate Men's Day. I'm sure many of us would know that there's a Men's Day also, right? And there are unique challenges and issues that we're dealing with. There's a new definition for masculinity, right? So I think a lot of things are changing, and which is very interesting time, very exciting time for all of us. So there, I thought we'll pick up this topic on gender neutrality. People have started talking about it, right? Because sometimes they talk too much about women, so they get a backlash. Sometimes people are scared. Sometimes they say, oh, no, we are getting some comments that, what about being from men? And they've started talking about, oh, we are gender neutral, right? Whether it's a Porsche, etc. People say, oh, we are gender neutral, right? In every policy. The idea is, I can tell you in my discussion with a lot of people, many of us have very different idea about gender neutrality, right? What does it mean in terms of the organizational practices, talent practices? What does it mean in terms of binary, non-binary? So there's a lot going on. I think we'll use this discussion to clarify some of our thoughts about it and the challenges. More than the challenges, my request would be, let's focus more also on what are some good practices to deal with it, right? And I would request the experts to share their experiences and guidance to all of us on, what are some takeaways for all of us so that we can, implement at our workplace or clarify our thoughts about it. So I don't want to talk only about the challenges, but I think I want to spend equal amount of time or more time on what has worked for you people, right? And what is your guidance to us, right? With that little brief context, so are we ready? Should we go ahead, experts?
Yeah, please.
If I have your okay, then we'll get in. Okay, so Pallavi, if I can start with you. You're joining us from a distance, so let me give you first priority.
Thank you.
Can you unpack for us in very simple terms gender neutrality? I'm sure all of us understand to some extent, but can you first of all bring us on the common page on what is meant by gender neutrality, and then how is it different from, you say we are gender inclusive, etc. So what's the difference here? In simple terms, in a brief, can you help us?
Yeah, and you asked the most important question, Sanjeev. So hello,
If you
everybody.
answer this well, we are done for the rest of the session.
I know. I will try my level best, but
Sure.
so primarily, I think it's trying to get the equality concept of it started with the men and women. When we started to say We need to be equal at workplace from a pay parity point of view, from making sure that there are no discrimination, there's no bias on account of gender. If you see what the Indian constitutional law says around gender neutrality, it is all related to men and women's non-discrimination related rights and laws. But from a corporate point of view, and in today's world, where now there is not just gender as in the gender that was assigned to you at birth, it is also about gender identity. So in today's, like when I say today, I mean in 2023, gender neutrality is a broader concept. It does not just cover men and women. It is now also covering the non-binary, or people who are either they identify as genderless, or they identify as they may be born in a particular gender but they identify as another gender. So I think what is, from a workplace point of view, the neutrality concept is that we need to make sure the workplaces are non-discriminatory for all these different categories of gender, as well as their gender identity. So gender identity is now getting baked into the neutrality concept, and that is why there is confusion on the policies, because like you said in the start of your introduction, all along we have been talking about diversity, representation, more women, more LGBTQ, give them more. So that was affirmative action, which is taking more positive action towards the representation of these groups. But at the same time, many years ago, women, including all of us, our generation, and I don't count myself anywhere close to, we are all pretty old in the workplace, we used to object to being called chairwoman and woman leaders. It started going into the concept of chairperson. So gender neutral language also started. So generally neutral language was there for some time. We don't call the chairperson and the and chairman versus chairwoman kind of concept started coming in, where people said we need to call everybody chairperson. And United Nations and all, for example, they say chairperson, they don't say man or woman. So that was there. Now you see all the he, him, they, them, her, his, her, and all the pronouns, the gender neutral language. So it is morphing, it's evolving. It's not something that we can, in this call, solve it. But I think it's a journey that we have to, all of us together have to learn, because the next generation of talent that is coming forward, the Gen Z, they really identify with the gender neutral concept. It is also about workplace, but we can talk later in the call, after all the speakers have given their views. So I hope I have confused you enough, by the way.
Yes, so I think that's a starting point, right? So disorder is the first thing, then you get into, before you get into order. So I think you brought some clarity into our understanding. And so Anandita, let me come to you. Why do you think this is important? I mean, while Pallavi has mentioned that we create a inclusive space, it is always good. So my question to you is it just a nice thing to have, or there's some business context to it, right? Because that's the language that most of us understand better, right? If we tell them a business context, while this is a absolutely right thing to do, but is there a business case? If so, what?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if there was anything beyond 100%, the business case does exist. So at a 200% or whatever be that number that we want to take at. So I think that's the first point, 100%. The second thing that I would like to mention is, while Pallavi did allude to it, but being gender neutral, we need to make sure that we talk about gender inclusive, and we talk about being genderless, right? So I would say gender inclusive in the workplace and having a genderless workplace is where we should be moving to. Having said that, I think it's very important for us here on the at least some of us who are in the discussion, to kind of see how that journey has been for us, right? If we look at the global world, right? If you look at across the globe, and for example, my organization has presence there. And, just before we had started, we were talking about it, that the Western world, as we in India used to, call the Americas at one point in time, is way ahead on that journey, right? They started to talk about gender neutralism as early as the 80s, right? Whereas if we come to the India context, we started to talk about genders only as late as 90s and early 2000. So when Pallavi was alluding to the fact that, we used to have these feminist kind of conversations of, how we want to be addressed and how we want to be noted in the workplace, and all of that was some efforts in the line of feminism at that point in time, right? And that had its own boundaries, that had its, people who were for it, against it, saying that we had taken it to a different level. And there were again different schools of thought. Today, when we talk of gender neutral, and we talk about, like I said, gender inclusion and genderless, we all have become more accepting in what is needed for us to do, right? So for us at HCL, I think one of the most key aspects is on inclusion. And inclusion is about everything. It's not just gender, but it's also in the other pillars that we have on diversity. So inclusion is what we are most focused on, and we believe that when we will have an inclusive language, to what Pallavi alluded to, we will have an inclusive workplace. We will have inclusive job profiles, so to speak, and job descriptions. I think the World Cup fever is with everyone. So one of the latest addition was that there's no batsman anymore, right? There is a batter. Right, while all the others were neutral terms, but batsman was the only term that existed. So that also has changed now. So we are evolving. We are constantly evolving. In the India context, the conversation has started. We have a long way to go. But I think some of us who are a part of global organizations, we might be able to make those strides faster because we are learning fairly fast from our global associations and people who are there.
Yeah. So, Nita, just a follow-up question to you. I mean, you represent a global organization, right? HCL Technologies and many other organizations are global, right? And you learn from there. So do you, just your perspective on that, you say in 1980, you started way ahead of, rest of the world, right? Any lesson that we learned from them that we could adopt here, India in particular, because most of us from India, so or Asia, right? I mean, this particular today the participant list, right? Any one lesson that you would like to share with us that we could be, because I think we have an advantage. Sometimes first mover, they don't have an advantage because they're experimenting. I think we should learn from there. So is there any lesson, any learning that you'd like to share with us that the India or Asian countries could learn from and be cautious about in this, as far as gender neutrality is concerned? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think when you started the question for me, the earlier question, you mentioned about a business case, right?
Yes.
In the 90s and in the 2000s, if some of us will reflect back on our working world, we would have to build a business case when we started to speak about gender, right? When we started to say that we must have women leaders, we must have women in the workforce, we must have a certain percentage representation. And at that time, we had to talk about benefits of having the same, right? We would say you would get XYZ, and that could be defined as diverse thinking, different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, women who are used to handling so many things at different levels, know how to work on relationships and deal with relationships, will handle the interpersonal skills at the workplace better, so on and so forth. At that point in time, the conversation was on the why there was a need, right? Today, from a gender neutral perspective or neutrality perspective, that is, I think, in India, the conversations that have started today. That why is it needed? Why is that recognition needed? Why is the space needed? Do we need to make provision for affirmative action here? Is there a requirement? Is there a space for me, for example, as an organization, to raise my hand and say that, yes, it's a safe place for you to come. It's a place where you are welcome. It's a place where There's no discrimination. It's a place where I have policies that are gender neutral. So from this topic perspective, I think one of the key lessons we should learn from there is that we need to start building that very, very strong business case and talking about it for it to become a norm rather than it just being a conversation for a webinar of this kind.
Great point, Nanita. Thanks for sharing that. And I think there's a lot that you mentioned. So we have made a note that, we must create a strong business case right in the beginning, and that till it becomes no one questions about it, right? I mean, it becomes a way of life. That's in our DNA. That's what it is. So thank you very much. Mr. Singh, coming to you. So one important question to you is, in my view, this is a journey because there are multiple tracks running parallelly, right? When we talk about diverse talent, right? It is gender, neurodiversity, disability inclusion, etc., etc. I mean, so multiple tracks are running at the same time. My only question to you is, and this, bothers me sometimes, that while so many years, last 15, 20 years, maybe more, we are talking about gender inclusion or their representation, I think across the world, I mean, including India, there's a lot of work happening. And we haven't achieved satisfactory results, in my view, right? Still, we are struggling. Still, we are talking about women in technology. Still, we are talking about women at leadership level. We are struggling still, right? When we start talking about gender neutrality, sometimes it means that everyone is same. We are not going to differentiate. And my fear is sometimes it can be detrimental to the affirmative actions that we are taking for better representation in view of gender neutrality. It can confuse people, right? So my question to you is this the right time for us to speak about gender neutrality, or should we reach a certain stage where we feel we are kind of okay in terms of representation and inclusion of different, not only gender, but different diverse talent, and we can talk about now gender neutrality, right? So is this the right time is a big question. Actually, that's the theme of this session also, but I want to ask your view on this.
Well, thanks, Sanjeev. It's a very important question. If we look at the genesis, why we started talking about diversity, it's one of the report I remember way back in 2012, 2013, from before, that Fortune 500 companies where there is a diversity is high, their revenue, market share, profits are high. So it is directly linked to your profitability, your sustainability, your market share, your revenue size. So with those big report, I think it was from McKinsey. So it was clearly established that organization, if they want to innovate, they want to lead in their segment wherever they are, they have to have a diverse workforce in their talent pool.
Perfect.
And then promoters, professional boards, global organization, they started putting HR, what should we do, how we can hire diverse candidate to have, inclusive organization or diversity in the workforce. So if I look at, how we evolved in manufacturing organizations, we had a lot of stereotyping, biases that women can do this, women are not available in the market. We are not ready as an organization to hire them and give them, facilities, infrastructure to perform.
Correct.
It would be very difficult, unsafe for them. So we in HR itself had a lot of biases. Performance won't come, this will happen, that will happen. It's all our biases. And we are, line managers were more than HR heads. So what happened, if you look at the pressure from the board, that legal things has come, in board you have to have, diverse gender in your board. That was mandatory coming from the Companies Act. And then when organization looked at, there is the only way to lead and be innovative and vibrant organization to have a diversity, in the organization. So they started looking for the right candidates in the markets. And how to attract them has become a challenge. So they started what Pallavi said, gender neutral GDs, gender neutral policies, commitment from leadership, acceptance of those workforce. So I think it's a high time for every organization, those who are looking to survive in next 5 to 10 years, they have to work over time to get diversity in the workforce. Otherwise, they are not going to survive, because a lot of talents, if you look at the legacy from our society, the talent pool available in the market, now the world has changed. The millennials, they feel that, their aspiration, their how they look at equity and inclusiveness, that is different than baby boomers. Of course, baby boomers have also changed. Now they have progressive mindset. They accept it. We should not label them. So I think it is the peak where every organization, I am listening from my board, from my executive team.
Yeah.
We are forced to, take the lead time, get the candidates, put them into system, and do whatever it takes to create the infrastructure and mindset, do the trainings like unconscious bias and other things. So we are all out propagating sensitizing
Absolutely.
our managers to make a workplace where we can attract and retain and give them career growth, because that's the way to survive. So I think those who are not talking or doing something, they will miss the bus.
So you're very rightly said, Mr. Singh, and I think the another dimension, sometimes we talk like IT or service sector, it is potentially much simpler to do it. I mean, I don't want to undermine the challenges. They have unique challenges, but I think in manufacturing, as you represent as a HR leader from a manufacturing organization, their challenges can be very, very different, right? My only question to you still is this the right time to speak about gender neutrality? Will it have a, and maybe Pallavi and Anandita, you can also chip in. My question is, if we start talking about gender neutrality, everything is same, we don't differentiate, etc. Will it have a negative impact on some good work that was already happening on, better representation of diverse talent into the organization, taking affirmative action? People may feel confused. No, we are gender neutral, we don't differentiate, etc. And no affirmative action. That's the real question in my mind. So, would anyone would like to comment on that?
Yeah.
Because I want to clarify this, amongst ourselves.
Sanjeev, if we look at, so there is no, harm in talking about the futuristic things, but we should at the same time not forget our current reality.
Exactly.
And reality is that if we compare with any European organization, be it service, be it manufacturing, be it local, be it global, what is the diversity? I am talking about only gender diversity.
Right now, okay.
Even the global organization having #1 position in their product and services, they are also saying that we are far behind our target. So what is the challenges? Why they are not able to, build a workforce where they can say we are 25%, 30%, even gender diversity in their workforce? That is not the case. And it is because of it. If I talk about India, it's if I talk about manufacturing organizations, we had, no infrastructure, no female, particularly soft floor side. If you go at, there is no, proper lighting, there is no, security things, there is no toilets, washroom. So a lot of issues. So nobody was thinking to hire those guys. Now, I think it's time to build your organization and mindset of your managers and employees to accept at least gender diversity. Sanjeev, we had 25% female candidates from campus. We had 1700 GTs from 2 and 3. And when in 2 to 3 years they become shift engineers, shift in charge, they come to us and tell, these bhaiya workers, welder, electrician, and welders, they think that, for 25, 30 years, all male engineers were coming and telling us, you are doing wrong, do this way, that way. They are not accepting us.
It's again a mindset.
You can see the mindset. They don't accept that a female will come and tell us how to do the welding or how to do the civil structure. They never thought of. And at the same time, they have to work, get the work done from them. So there is a lot of, mindset. There is a lot of stereotype, biases from the people, because we all are coming from our families. We see,
we are a reflection, organization. So you're right. One place is
after the 9 months of the birth, the person start, identifying the gender. It's mother bias or father bias. If some bias is coming, with the bias itself, he is generally gender biased since the birth. So it's very difficult to evaporate from the mind, but we have to make conscious effort. I think with the diversity, gender diversity in the one's workplace and the mindset change, the other things will fall in place automatically.
Correct. So let me
We should
you.
start from the basics.
Yeah, so
So-
I think Sanjeev, before you move to the next point, I think
I want
there's
to
a
stay
very
on this.
interesting conversation happening on the chat as well, right? So there are three pertinent points that have come up here. One, somebody's asked a question on the impact of education that'll contribute to having a more gender neutral society. Interestingly, there's another point that Venkatesh has brought up in terms of certain organizations talking about diversity, however, not being able to implement it at a grassroots level. And then, of course, it's the manufacturing industry that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think the point that I would like to make here is that, let's look at it with 2 or 3 different dimensions very, very clearly. One, of course, is what we are talking about is industry. I think the three of us here today, and Sanjeev, I include you and Sushil and everyone, we are representing 3 or 4 very different sectors of industry. Each one of us is at a different evolution journey that we have had so far, right? So I think that is one dimension that we have to look at. The second dimension, I think, Mr. JP very, very beautifully brought out, is the different generations that are working together today. For example, today in HCL, we have 5 generations working together, and each generation has a different perspective on diversity. Forget what pillar of diversity, right? Whether we speak gender or any other, but they have a different perspective there. So we have to look at that, and therefore, depending on the percentage of which generation you have and how they are going to be able to be accepting or more inclusive of a different set of people, that will become one other angle for us to look at. And of course, the third and final would be what I had initially begun my conversation with, saying that which part of the world are we coming from, and therefore the larger society that we live in. Right? So India being patriarchal from how we have been brought up, and that's how our education system is, that's how we are trained, that's how we are coached. But if you look at the generation today, the alpha that we're going to be calling in, none of them are having this conversation. Being gender neutral just comes very naturally to them, right? They absolutely have no biases at all in any level of interaction. And therefore, it is not a conversation. I mean, today, if you look at the colleges that, probably some of us go to higher at, it is not a conversation topic at all. Because everybody has become very accepting of it because they are in that age group. Right. So I just wanted to put that on the table before I hand it back to you, Sanjeev, for your next set of questions for us.
Good. Pallavi, over to you again.
Yeah,
On this, my specific question is again stays with that, and I want to spend some time on that. Is this the right time? Will it take us away from the efforts that we are making, or it is okay that we talk about it in along with what we are doing, affirmative action? So your comments on that.
Sanjeev, you're touching basically on the key confusion, and you, as you rightly said, you are confused about it. I think gender neutrality and affirmative action, there is a tension between the two, because it seems to be opposing things. One is saying that we should be neutral, the other is saying you have to take more action towards a particular cohort of diversity. But the fact remains that gender neutrality is related to policy statements that an organization or a corporate puts in place in order to be inclusive. Now, you don't need to do that if you actually don't have that cohort enough in your organization. So actually, affirmative action is definitely needed to bring that cohort in at the levels, because as Mr. Singh has said, as Anindita has said, the business case of doing that is already proven. We can't afford to get away from it. And by the way, you and I, we are going to retire in a few years, and there's going to be a whole new generation that is coming, and which, as Anandita said, they are completely flexible, they are much more open, they are exposed to a lot more acceptance of this than our generation is or was, right? And the social media, whether it is things that you see on, on all the streaming channels, they are much more exposed, and therefore they are much more accepting and understanding of the diversity that is there across. So we have to look at, as talent leaders or HR leaders, we have to look at how we're going to attract talent in the future. And we will completely lose the plot if we don't address it. So affirmative action is a given, has to be done. Now, once you do the affirmative action, once you brought the people into the organization, that is the diversity part of DEI. You built a diverse organization by hiring them. Then you need to include them.
Yeah.
And that is why DEI, the E is in the middle, the equity, equality stands in the middle. It will only be driven if diverse representation is there and the inclusivity is there. Then equity, equality, everything will follow. So it's important to address both fronts. It's a good balance. And the reason, that's where I think one of the questions in the chat is about education. It is about education. If we hired a ton of women, a ton of non-binary people, a ton of disabled people, and we forgot to include them, everything else will go for a toss because they'll leave the next, in the next few months. So it's important to address both, but it's also important, and I completely appreciate Anandita's point. I'll use the Hindi phrase because I think this is an Indian audience, really. My father used to say this to me a lot. As you take decisions, it has to be desh kal nimit. It needs to be contextual to the country and the time. If I had to have the same conversation in Saudi Arabia today or Iran today about women and gender, see what conversations we are going to have there. Look at what women are fighting in Iran for, just to get the hijab out. So it has to be contextual.
Contextual.
In India, every corporate has to look at their culture. They need to, but I think the mandate to do it, everybody on this call and corporate sector overall has the responsibility to continue the conversation and bring that, that positivity around it. But parallelly, we also have a role as corporates to educate the society, because we are going to build the next generation of talent and leaders. So the biases and the microaggressions that happen for a certain diverse cohort, that needs to be addressed, and that is education. So it is a parallel journey. It is a journey. It will evolve. India is far behind on some of this. So to answer your original question, is the time right? The time is absolutely right and past. We have to continue to address it.
Correct. So I think thanks for, it's a complex subject, but I think you really helped us understand with clarity that we can't undo the work which has to happen, has to continue while we start talking about it, right? Gradually. So not at the cost of this. So it's not this or that. It has to be this and that kind of thing. That's how
absolutely. It's not something that is sitting on opposing ends of the spectrum. It has to go parallel.
All right. So, Mr. Singh, one question you are, before that, Venkatesh, would you like to unmute yourself? You are contributing immensely. Thank you very much for doing that. You have declared, you don't declare yourself as he or she, right? Non-binary person you declared. So I think you are thank you for joining, first of all. As a talent, you as a talent, ultimately, what do you expect from the organizations to do for, people like you? I want to hear from you. Since we have you here and we are fortunate, so we want to hear from you. What is your expectation to your leaders, your HR leaders? Why don't you share in brief?
Sure. Is my voice audible?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Namaskar, and yeah, thanks, Sanjeev, for this beautiful session. I think it's really important because we have seen such sessions happening during Pride Month, and especially a person identifying as a non-binary individual. I think the challenges. I have been lucky enough to work in the social development sector with inclusive organizations, but I think I've just raised certain very few points which are very important and valid, like having gender-neutral pronouns, having gender-neutral restrooms, gender-neutral. I will not name a particular airline, but many of you might have been traveling. We see they say good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And during
Yes.
Pride Month, you will find in-flight Pride magazines, very inclusive, very inclusive. No offense. When you try to be inclusive, you have to have gender neutral announcements as well. Till date, I am bound to buy a ticket with my salutation of Mr. Whereas Air India, Vistara came up with MX. So these are steps. So basic steps, having gender neutral salutations, जेंडर न्यूट्रल रेस्ट रूम्स. बहुत जगह बताया जाता है कि हाँ हमारे पास स्पेस नहीं है, हम बना नहीं सकते एक रेस्ट रूम. ठीक है, बना नहीं सकते हो, इट्स ओके, बट हैविंग अ स्पेस. देन आई हैव सीन अ लॉट ऑफ प्लेसेस टुडे. आई हैव फेस्ड दैट, एंड आई थिंक आई एम रियली going to a corporate. I have to be very careful where the clothes, like if I quote unquote my document might say male, that's okay, but at the end of the day it's my identity, who I identify as. Having a, like, if I'm not comfortable quote unquote wearing a shirt and pant and tie just because my ID says male, I am not been allowed to go at many workplaces because they have that quote unquote thing. So if I'm comfortable wearing a sari on my beard, I should be included. So these are very little steps. I think baby steps we all as an individual can take. And what happens, no, this conversation June month आएगा, June 1 से 30 तो इतने कॉल आ जाते हैं कि या कॉल पे आ जाओ, मीटिंग कर लो. June 30 के बाद आप कौन हो मैं नहीं जानता, आप जो May 31st तक आप कौन हम नहीं जानते. So this has to be throughout the year conversation, like what we say when we want to bring a change. No, अगर आप 1 महीने करोगे ऑटोमेटिकली आप नेक्स्ट साल आओगे ना. नेक्स्ट साल में हम लोग 20 लोगों में शायद हम 5 लोग इधर रहेंगे, 10 लोग कहीं और चले जाएंगे. So this has to be a continuous
But you
process
know,
throughout the
Venkatesh,
year.
I'll tell you what I always say, that one day may not be important, but the decisions that you take on that day may be very important throughout the year, right? So, I mean,
Certainly,
it has
yeah.
significance celebrating certain days. It has
Correct.
importance to reinforce certain thoughts, right? And it carries on. So, my specific question, Venkatesh, I mean, anything that you want to tell the HR leaders or the business leaders who are there in this call, you as a talent who do not disclose as a male or female, right? What is your expectation, couple of expectations from the organization, right? As a talent, you are there with us, so I want to ask you
Yeah,
straight
I am
forward.
also in the HR team of Navgorokul as well. So coming to that, I think these are बहुत सारे instances. No, we get to tend with the profile. The moment a CV comes, that is the sort of impression. हाँ ये CV आ गया, ये ऐसे है, तो हम इसको पहले ही हम reject कर देंगे. CV हो
If
गया,
you can
second.
speak in English, because I think there could be people from different regions who may not understand
Yeah.
Hindi.
So
No.
the
I'm
most
just being
important thing when it
conscious.
happens is the first impression when the CV comes. If there's a photo, okay, the photo is not matching with the name. Or when you call them, I have seen a very basic thing. For example, unka naam, someone's name is Ayushi, but the person when they receive the call, quote unquote, the voice. It's second impression. Oh, the voice doesn't matches. So we won't. So these are very things, a lot of things I have faced personally in my 10 years. I have faced a lot of struggles going through organizations. Now I'm in the HR team. I try to build inclusive policies, posh policies.
Great.
I'm recently drafting. But having these things, and you might, okay, the organization as a level of HR, they might be inclusive and they might hire me. But when I get on board, for example, in a team, I should rest assured that I can sustain myself. My team shouldn't be, see, people, there are 140 people in the call, so I might not expect everyone to be very inclusive or very sensitized, right? Because we come from different generations and it takes time. But I should be assured that today if I am facing any issue, my team as an organization, if I go to my HR team, they will help me in assuring that, okay, that discrimination or that if you're facing any challenges, the consequences, the actions would be taken against. But this we don't have, and we don't understand the boundaries. This, oh, you're a female, you go home at 6 o'clock. मतलब तुम तो लड़की हो, you have family at home, and that's your work, you have to go home. So this certain way of your way of tone, way of speech is really important when you address people, irrespective of any gender. I think when you do this as and make it inclusive, people feel safe, and then you have the sustainability in an organization also.
True. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for coming, and talking to us on this and joining this. So I think your perspective as a talent is important. Mr. Singh, one question to you as HR leader. Today's manager or leaders, they have to face huge challenges. The workplaces are changing, the talent landscape is changing, and then diversity is tough to understand for any manager or for HR, right? And it leads to, as we call it, diversity fatigue, right? As I was saying in the beginning, because there is so much that you have to deal with. And let's acknowledge it's a stress, you have to spend time and efforts, right? As a HR leader, how do you think organizations should deal with this diversity fatigue because of this gender neutrality and inclusion, participation, belonging, everything which is going on? How do we handle that diversity fatigue? Do you feel it is there or no?
I don't think so, because it is a
Okay.
very difficult thing for line managers at least. We in HR, we are thinking, but those who are in core into technical function, R&D functions, they are welcoming it and they are, experimenting and learning that what is this new thing, and they are showing curiosity also. So how we are, going ahead, there is a commitment from our leadership team, none other than our chairman. So there is a, it's a part of annual business plan of HR metrics that what would be the diversity percentage in organization where we are, and then we cascade down to our unit level, function level, and then we look at how many lateral hires, campus hires, if there is attrition, what is the region, where we are as an inclusive workplace, are gender friendly. Diversity, female, if I can talk about female diversity. So whether we are ready or not, what we need to do. So we have a multi-pronged approach. One, there is a clear-cut commit from leadership team. Then what we did, we started educating our managers, right from CEOs, that why we need, what is diversity, what is inclusion, what is equity, and then what are the, leading organizations are doing, what is what as an organization we want to do, what you need to understand. Our managers now knows that any human being, through research it has come, 87% they are biased. 87% we all are biased.
So,
as an
so do you think with 87% people having bias, do you think if we talk about diversity inclusion, is there a fatigue around? You feel it's not within HR, at least it's not, right?
It takes toll to think that where I am biased, because we don't accept that we are biased. But with many examples, and you ask what is this figure, and they will, the way they tell it, you can immediately make it out. So what we are doing, this bias training to our managers, particularly those who are responsible for people.
Okay.
Right. And then what are the language things, policy side. So I think we are in the action mode.
Okay.
And there's a long way to go. We are very clear where we want to be. So at least in JSW or in my past organization, which was MNC company, Siemens, where we were, globally talking in all the discussions, we always talked about diversity and how to bring them on board. It's not one day affair, as Venkatesh is. It's a matrix driven. There is a review. There is a progress review.
There's a commitment. There's a commitment from the organization.
Cause is analyzed. Managers give feedback. It's not HR responsibility to retain diverse candidates. It's manager part of KRA. Their part.
So let me ask Pallavi and Anandita. Do you think there's a fatigue? Yes or no? Or it's it's very natural.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there is a fatigue. So let me explain. I think I feel, and
I have a slightly different view to that, but I'll get to that later.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that there is a fatigue around the representation part of it, and I think India actually has no excuse for it, because their primary focus in India at this point of time is women diversity. I think the non-binary piece, a lot of the progressive corporates definitely are taking some actions on it, but I don't see enough, but I may be wrong, and Anandita and Mr. Singh can weigh in. But from a overall at a global, and I look at Asia Pacific as a region, the reason for the fatigue is that there is a demand from talent for inclusiveness at every cohort level. So when there is intersection of multiple cohorts, and this is happening in America, you're familiar with it. You have to be a woman, a Black, and LGBT, non-binary person who potentially also does not identify as a her or his, and is non-binary. So you have the LGBTQ plus the non-binary. Think of the 4 permutation combinations that might happen. And by the way, diversity is not just at the racial level. There's diversity, there's disabled. So if you put all the different categories of diversity which is there in the developed world, and then you try to give, as a talent person, if I'm asked to give representations to each cohort, I mean, it's overwhelming. And every cohort, by the way, in some of the developed economies have a very vocal voice. So how do you ensure that you're able to do that? So that's why a lot of companies are trying to now net it down to say, okay, we have LGBTQ, but we don't necessarily, and the inclusivity is coming in the gender neutral policies, but not necessarily on representation, because it's very difficult to do the representation for every cohort. So you restrict it to race. America has equal opportunity. Other countries have other kind of cohorts that they focus on from a representation point of view, which is why everywhere you will see women representation as a metric that is tracked. Most corporates will be tracking their women representation, their LGBTQ representation, but that's it. Because you cannot actually go and do more affirmative actions for every cohort. The inclusiveness is on the rest of it. So that's where every company is trying to see how can we bring more gender neutral policies, inclusiveness, remove biases in hiring, remove microaggressions against this population that may not be very accepted. So I think it's a journey again. The fatigue is when there's too much of focus on trying to bring representations of a certain cohort. I think that there is definitely fatigue. I don't know if you saw the news just 3 days ago or 4 days ago, where in US, the Texas government has gone and removed all the words that are that talk about gender neutrality in any way. They've gone and removed it. They're only talking in terms of men and women. And this is endorsed by the mayor and the council, and they've made a law of it. You can read it so I was reading that news with interest to see why, and you should hear the YouTube video on that, because they're talking about that they think this whole journey has gone in a completely wrong direction. And they're trying to now recoup some of that. So I think the backlash is happening because there's just too many categories that are coming up on this. And somebody gave me an example I wanted to share. They said, we used to have only men, so there was a ball which had like a single color. Then you brought in women, there were 2 colors on that ball. Now, and by the way, you broke them into pieces and said everybody has to be inclusive. It was easy to be inclusive with women. Now you've broken that ball into multiple pieces, and now you're trying to unify them. So trying to unify many pieces into a ball versus two into a ball is that much more difficult. So
that's a very nice way of sharing the perspective.
It's like you break them into so many pieces, and then you're telling us to bring it all together into an inclusive atmosphere. It is a valid point. I personally feel that it is also about the representation, to my original context, about country and context, and the generations that we are. In most corporates today, we have a lot of baby boomers and the Gen X, to which we belong, right? How much were we exposed to the non-binary or women population? So for us, the inclusivity aspects, to this extent, there will be always a generation of people. We are in HR, we moved forward from there, but there will always be a set of people that will be uncomfortable. I think over the next 10 years, when the new leaders actually coming from the Gen Z,
things will change.
We'll see the change.
Accelerate. So Ananta, you had a point. Thank you, I think, for detailed explanation and very nice explanation of the way things are moving. But Anita, your thoughts on this? I have a couple of questions after that, because we have very limited time now.
Yes.
So very sharp reactions
I'll
from
keep
you.
it. Yeah, I'll keep it very, very precise, actually.
Yeah.
So I think Pallavi did touch upon it, and she did mention, I think the reason why I'm saying that I don't agree with the fact that there is fatigue now is because the conversations are constantly changing. you know, because it's not about the same thing. So yes, at one point in time, we were talking about getting more women in the workforce, right? But now we're talking about multiple other things along with it.
True.
So I don't think the fatigue is because of that. So it's about now conversations of awareness, conversations about being inclusive, conversations of, you know, like Mr. JP was mentioning that, you know, they're talking about training on bias. I think in my current organization and my erstwhile organization, we spoke about bias a couple of years ago, right? And we kind of moved from there to. So I don't think the fatigue is there,
Okay.
and I think if we do have the time, I'd love to hear Mihir's perspective on, you know, when he made a point.
He made an interesting comment that
Yes,
fatigue
that
is for male
fatigue is
managers,
male
not for women.
managers.
They want it. Correct.
So
So that's
gender
interesting.
neutrality is not about women wanting more.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, that was more on a lighter note, but yes.
So
So I think it's about inclusiveness, it's about awareness, and constantly being more accepting and changing conversations at the workplace.
so one more question, Antar, that I have to you. What roles can allies play in this whole equation? HR will do their role, managers will do, because it's a part of their job, right? They have to do it, kind of thing, right? HR has to do. I mean, they may be doing it in their heart, but that's their role, right? You don't have a choice. But I think the success of these initiatives lies with the allies, right? How well are they enabled, right? And they're visible, you know, into the whole game, because that's where they're on the ground, they'll make it. So what is the role of allies here in
I
making this?
So as per me, and this is 100% my personal view, each one of us should raise our hand to be an ally to what we are convinced is the right thing to do, right? So for example, if we feel a conversation for having more women in the workforce is what I need to be talking about, or I am more towards having a gender neutral workplace or a genderless workplace, it's for each one of us to raise our hand to be an ally, to understand that it means that you're supporting that person without a barrier, right? So currently we were talking gender, but I'm saying without any barrier. It could be any diverse person.
Any diverse talent, could be
Any diverse
neurodiversity,
talent.
could be
Absolutely.
multi-generational, anything. All right.
Absolutely. So as long as a person feels included and I'm an ally who will support that person in my capacity in my workplace,
Should
for
raise
me
them.
that's the role of an ally. And I would 100% want each one of us to get people to become allies and have a better workplace.
True. So you are on mute, Pallavi, but Vijaya, just
Yeah.
can you put up the screen? There's a couple of announcements I have to make, but you make your point while she's putting up the slide. Go
I
ahead.
just
Quick
very
one.
short point. I think important point, because I think this is where some of the backlash aspects come in also. So to Anandita's point on everybody being an ally, I would really call out the diverse cohort, which means women, all of us, right? And the non-binary talent as well. That one of the most important aspect of inclusion is that the word is meant to be inclusive of everybody. So women, if they are going to be only allies to women, they are going to alienate the men. I've had cases where the women manager became a leader, and then she is a great diversity champion and brings in a lot many more women, and then promotes a lot of women, and then creates the impression that she is just somebody who will only take care of women. I've had resignations of the male talent reporting to her because they said, I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get promoted under her. So allyship, send the elevator back down. If you took the elevator and reached to the top, whether you're a non-binary talent, you're a cisgender, you are a woman, it's your duty to be a mentor and bring your cohort up, definitely. But you have to make sure that you are an ally for everybody too, because when leaders start to display a bias only towards their cohort, they lose that leadership tag. So
great
I
point.
want to make that
Absolutely
point
great
because
point.
I've seen a lot of women completely forget that inclusiveness means their entire team, which includes men.
So with that, thank you very much for bringing that on that point. So we have a couple of announcements. I just take 2 more minutes, and I'm sure we'll close after that. I wish we had more time, but I think there's never enough time for topics like this. So one couple of announcements that in November, we celebrate Men's Day. So there are a few things that we offer as Enabling World, some unique programs on men's health on Men's Day, which could be, useful, like addiction and the hair effects, parenting, and it also about new masculinity. So we talk about different topics. If anyone is keen, can reach out. And then DI, we have various things, as you rightly said, all of you. It's not about gender only, and we as Enabling World, we are passionate about very diverse talent segments, and we do support our clients on whether it's a PWD or LGBTQI, neurodiversity or gender diversity, etc. So we could help, in case anyone is interested. So Vijay, you can stop sharing. There'll be a small poll that my team would send to all the participants, wonderful audience. Give your comment on how the session was. That will help us, encourage us to, do it more often and on topics that are of interest. So give your candid feedback. So there's a survey that, it's a 30-second survey that Vijaya will put it on the screen. So give your very candid feedback. Now, with that, we are coming to close. My, first of all, sincere thanks to all the experts, Mr. Singh, bringing very different perspective about manufacturing and what great things JSW is doing. So wonderful initiatives. Thank you very much for that. And to Anandita in your role, so you get very global perspective on the history of the way things are moving, what lessons we have learned out of it, and your views on the fatigue. So I'm very happy to know that no, there's no fatigue. We are all excited and moving forward with that. That's a great thing to know. And Pallavi, from you, again, a global perspective that you shared with us, and also, unpacking very clearly about this tension that we have between gender neutrality and the affirmative action that we need to take about better representation and inclusion of different gender diversity in the workplace. I think it's a little complex issue, but still I think we are making some headway in terms of understanding. But one thing is sure, that we cannot do gender neutrality at the cost of affirmative actions that we are taking today for better representation of all diverse talent segments, be it gender, be it a PWD or any other kind of talent. So not at the cost, but that's a end state when, without even making any efforts, we can be all gender neutral. That's a wish that we all have, that we reach that stage. May not be in my lifetime, but very soon, right? In working life, right? But very soon, I think we can happen. And such discussions will really help in accelerating that journey. I'm sure that, right? So I'm sure all of us would have taken some takeaways from this session. And this wonderful audience, and Venkatesh especially, who really contributed to this discussion and made it really rich in terms of your comments. And I'm sorry, I would not have been able to take all the questions for paucity of time, but I'm sure there was enough discussion around, important points that we wanted to make here. So with that, I think we'll close the session. Thank you, audience. Stay safe, and let's continue, be the ally, and then, raise hand wherever we can and help the cause in the respective workplaces, in societies, in families. Don't restrict only at the workplace, but wherever we are. Ally is an ally. Someone was asking, ally is an ally. It's not at workplace or a home in society. Once you're an ally, you're an ally everywhere, right? So with that, so thank you again, experts, once again. I enjoyed the discussion. I learned a lot in this, and I'm sure all of us would have taken some lessons out of it. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting us, Sanjeev, and enjoyed the
Thank
session.
you. Have a great
Thank you,
evening.
Anandita.
You
Nice
too.
meeting
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sushil. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank
team, for
you. Thank
doing
you,
this.
panelists.
Thank you.